Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. As you all know from the title of this video, it is Conquest Part 2 Issue 1 and we are going to be painting the Ultramarines Intercessors today. Really enjoyed doing this. It was really awesome to paint them. Really cool to add the detail and hopefully help you guys out with all the tips and tricks in making your miniatures look awesome. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone who subscribed to my channel for all the fantastic comments and everyone who gave us a thumbs up. It was really nice to see and it made me really happy, to be honest. It was just awesome. So thanks for that guys, but let's jump into the painting tutorial. Okay guys, so this is my miniature ready and assembled to paint. Now to begin with, we're going to base coat it with Chaos Black Spray. You may be wondering why we're going to do this as it's already blue, but it's good to add a base coat. This will just help the paint to adhere to the model. We're then going to add another base coat using Macragge Blue. Before applying this, it's always good to water down your paints just a little bit. This will just thin the paints down and help you to avoid clogging the details on the miniature. I would suggest applying 2 coats of this. It will just give you full opacity on the miniature and avoid any of the black undercoat showing through. Now that we've fully based the miniature, we're now ready to apply a shade. For this, I'm going to use Agrax Earth Shade. Take a fine detail brush and apply this to all the recesses in the model, just like I am here. Don't apply too much, as it won't give the desired shadow effect. Be as neat as you can, but it's okay if you make a mistake because we can just clean this up later using Macragge Blue. This is how the miniature should look after applying the shade. It's given it a really cool shadow effect and really helped to bring out the details in the miniature. With that, we're now ready to highlight. To do this, I'll be using Calgar Blue and again a fine detail brush. I always find it's best to water down the paints just a little bit. It will just help them apply smoother. All I'm going to do with this step is just run my brush very carefully along all the edges of the model. Just take your time with this step, there's no need to rush, and if you make a mistake, again, we can just clean it up later. Once you've finished highlighting all the edges, it will look somewhat like this. Just like the shade, it's really helped to emphasise all the details on the miniature. With the highlights done, the armour is now complete and we can move on to the gold details. To begin with, I'm going to use Retributor armour and my detail brush to base the trims on the shoulder pads and the details on the chest. If you're unsure of where to put the gold, look in the magazine and this will show you. Just like with Macragge Blue, I'll be applying 2 thin coats to give full opacity. With the base gold complete, we can now add a shade. Again, I'll be using Agrax Earth Shade, but unlike with the armour, I'll be coating all of the gold, not just the recesses. Be careful not to apply too much, as this will clog the details and cause puddling across the gold. Once the shade is dried, we can then move on to highlighting the gold. Using Liberator Gold, I'm going to highlight all the edges of the trims using the same technique as I did with the armour. With the detail on the chest, I'm looking to highlight all the edges where the shade isn't set. To do this, I'm going to run my brush over some tissue so there is minimal paint on it, then run it gently over the design. This will then only catch the edges of the gold. If you're happy with how the gold's looking, you can leave it here. But I'm going to add one final highlight. To do this, I'm going to use a fine detail brush and Storm Host Silver. I'm not looking to apply this to all the edges, just the very corners of the trims and the tips of the wings on the chest. With that last highlight added, the gold is now complete. There are loads more details on the miniature to paint, so now I'm going to move on to the black details. Using a Baden black and a detail brush, I'm going to base all the parts of the model that should be black. This includes the belt, the holster and the gaps in the armour at the back of the miniature's knees and tops of the leg. If you're unsure, check the magazine for areas that should be black. However, don't base the gun just yet though, as we'll move on to this at a later stage. The miniature's really starting to come together now, and with the black base, we can now move on to the metal areas of the model. I will be using lead belcher and a fine detail brush to paint these areas. Don't forget to water your paints down just a little to help prevent it from clogging the details. Now these details aren't in the magazine, so the areas you want to paint with lead belcher are the handle inside the holster, the straps on the back, any vent areas and pipes on the helmet and feet. Once again, leave the weapon as we will be returning to this at a later stage. Now that we've based these details, we can now add a shade. As we have done in other areas of the model, I will be using known oil to add an all-over shade to the black and metal areas of the miniature. Remember not to use too much of this as we don't want to clog the details on the miniature. Whilst we are waiting for the shade to dry, this is a good opportunity to move on to the gun. To begin with, I'm going to base all the metal areas using lead belcher. I'm doing this first so I don't have to worry about being too neat with it. If you're unsure which areas to paint with lead belcher, check out the cover of the magazine and this will give you an idea of which parts to paint. Now that I've completed the metal areas of the weapon, I will now base the rest using a Baden black. As we did with lead belcher, if you're unsure which areas to paint, use the cover of the magazine as a guide. Once this is completed, we can move on to adding, yes, you guessed it, a shade. Using known oil, coat the entire gun. This is the point in the video where I forget to film after shots of each stage. Sorry guys. Once again, whilst we wait for the shade to dry, we can move on to the purity seal. To begin, base the paper of the seal in Racar flesh. We will then shade the purity seal in Agrac's Earthshade. Unfortunately, at this point, I forgot to press record. After adding the shade, I then very carefully applied pallid witch flesh to the paper using a fine detail brush, leaving thin gaps for the shade to show through. After this, I moved on to the wax seal and coated it in Mephiston red. At this point, I am just shading the wax seal in Agrac's Earthshade. This will just help to add depth. Once this is dried, I then use Pink Horror to add a highlight to the centre and the very edges of the wax seal. And then a final highlight of Emperor's Children, but only to the most raised areas of the seal. At this point, the shade on all the metal areas and the black areas is completely dry, so I'm now moving on to add a highlight of Stormhost Silver to all the metal areas on the model. This includes the body of the miniature and the weapon. We might as well do these stages all in one go. Now, using Eshin Grey, we're going to highlight all the edges of the black. Remember to use your fine detail brush for this and to water down your paints. Also, remember to use the edge of your brush to really give a smooth highlight. Like we did with the gold, you could leave it at this point, but I'm not going to. I'm going to add one last highlight of Dawnstone just to really make the black areas pop. With all that complete, there's only one more detail to add to the miniature, and that's the eyes. Using Mephiston Red, coat the entire lens of the miniature. Use a fine detail brush for this, and remember it's really fiddly, so it's okay to make mistakes. We can just clean them up at a later date. Next, coat the front half of the lens in Evil Sun Scarlet. This will just help to give the lens a glowing effect. Remember, again, it's really fiddly, so if you make mistakes, we can clean them up at a later date. Once again, to the very inner corner of the lens, add one last layer of Wild Rider Red. Finally, we're just going to add a very small amount of White Scar to the very centre of the lenses. This will just help the lenses to really stand out. With that, the model is now complete, and you've got a really awesome and detailed looking miniature. And that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching my painting tutorial on the Conquest magazine, issue 1, Painting Ultramarines Intercessors. I really hope you found it useful. I hope I gave you lots of tips and tricks, and I hope I taught you some things that you didn't really know about how to paint miniatures, such as the shades and the highlights. I do love my shades and I do love my highlights. I just think they make the miniatures look fantastic. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a massive thumbs up. Leave some comments down below. If you want to give me tips and tricks, if you want to tell me how you would do things, leave it all down below in the comments. Any general advice on miniatures, or if you want to ask me for advice on miniatures, go for it. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, guys, if you enjoyed it, and subscribe to my channel. Also, hit the bell icon. It will notify you every time I upload a video. I'm also on Instagram, so make sure you follow me there. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.